Hello everyone, welcome to a special episode of Comics for Casuals, because today I'm talking about one of my favorite characters, Miles Morales, the Ultimate Spider-Man. Yesterday, Miles got his very own game with the release of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, a spin-off game to the widely successful Spider-Man PS4 game from 2018. So what better time to talk about Miles and his whole deal? Exactly. There literally will never be a better time to cover Miles Morales on the show. Literally never. Anyway, that's what we'll be doing here today. Also, I'll be replacing footage of my face in this video with gameplay from the new game. That way I have an excuse to play it as much as possible. In the last few years, Miles has really taken off and made a name for himself, which is pretty impressive considering he's a different/new version of an existing character, which is something comic fans aren't typically big on. Comic fans don't like change, like the whole Ben Reilly thing. Watch this video to learn more about that. That's why every decade or so, they have a big cosmic event that resets the status quo of the whole universe, which is always nice and confusing. But despite all that, Miles still managed to make it big. He even starred in the best Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is definitely the best Spider-Man movie, and you can fight me in the comments about it. Miles was created by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli in 2011 as part of the Marvel Ultimate line of comics. The fact that he premiered as part of the Ultimate Universe is probably one of the factors that made him as successful as he ended up being. See, the Ultimate Universe was basically a new and revamped version of the typical Marvel universe that existed alongside the main universe. This meant they could change the origins of characters and events without affecting the main continuity. They still had all the big names like Iron Man, Captain America, the X-Men, and of course, Spider-Man, but they started new with all of them. When the Ultimate Comic Universe launched in 2000, Peter Parker was still Spider-Man, but with a slightly different origin and different takes on most of his side characters, such as Green Goblin, who was literally transformed into a giant monster. This provided a chance to introduce a completely new character without messing with the classic version of Spider-Man. So, in 2011, they made the ballsy move to kill off Peter Parker and replace him with Miles Morales. During an epic face-off with Green Goblin, Peter makes his final stand, but is tragically killed. Now, if you've seen the Spider-Verse movie, then you'll notice that most of the origin from that movie lines up with the Miles comic origin. A big character in that movie is Miles' uncle, Aaron Davis, who is secretly the villain, the Prowler. In the comics, Aaron is directly responsible for creating the new Spider-Man. The Ultimate Comics version of Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, knows that Peter was bitten by a spider from his own lab, and that said spider gave him his powers. This led him to try and duplicate the process. That's even what eventually turned him into a big goblin monster. And at one point, he was even successful. Using Peter's blood, they create a formula that reproduces the effects of the original spider and even create a new one. Prowler breaks into Oscorp Labs and steals the formula, and while he's there, the spider climbs into his duffel bag. A few days go by, and Miles goes to visit his uncle and is bitten by the spider. Bam! New Spider-Man. At first, Miles doesn't want his powers and wants to continue living a normal life. So, after telling his best friend, Genki Lee, he just goes back to living a normal life. That is, until Peter's death. With Spider-Man dead, Miles starts to feel guilty, thinking he should have been there to help Peter, and that if he had, then maybe Peter would still be alive. He buys a Spider-Man costume and starts to fight crime. Since he uses the Spider-Man name, he draws some unwanted attention to himself, including a very pissed off Spider-Woman and S.H.I.E.L.D. Spider-Woman, whose real name is Jessica Drew, doesn't like the fact that he's using the Spider-Man name since she was close to Peter and arrests Miles, bringing him to the main S.H.I.E.L.D. base. While there, he faces off against Electro and uses his patented Venom Blast attack to subdue him. This impresses Nick Fury, who gives him his new costume. And despite living in a completely different universe at first, mainstream Peter and Miles managed to meet and work together several times. The first time being in the limited Spider-Man series, where Peter is accidentally sent to the Ultimate Universe and the two team up, ending with Peter giving Miles his blessing to be the new Spider-Man. They then meet again in the first Spider-Verse crossover event that loosely inspired the film. I don't want to give away too much of his story because it is a great read and you should definitely check them out. But I feel like there is one more big event I should talk about real quick. In 2015, the Ultimate line of comics came to an end. This happened with the big universe-wide crossover event called Secret Wars that featured the main Marvel Universe, which is referred to as 616, and the Ultimate Universe, which is Universe 1610. I won't get into the meat of this crossover because it is insane and there's a lot that goes into it. But the important thing to know about this is that it ends with reality being rewritten, and when this happens, Miles and all his supporting cast are brought over to the main Marvel continuity. This basically means that Miles and all his characters exist in the 616 universe like they've been there all along. Only Miles and Peter remember the old Ultimate Universe. That's pretty important to mention. Knowing what I've talked about in this video, you should be able to pick up the Miles Morales story from the beginning and understand all the happenings. The thing to keep in mind is that while Miles' original universe is very similar to the main one, it does have its differences, such as the Avengers being called the Ultimates instead of the Avengers. But none of that really matters in the context of Miles' story, it's just, keep it in mind. I do recommend checking out the Spider-Man Limited series from 2012 because it shows the very first meeting of Peter and Miles, and it's pretty awesome. The best place to start overall is with Ultimate Comics Spider-Man Volume 1, Who is Miles Morales, because obviously that's the very beginning, and from there you can pretty much read his whole series. Also, check out the new Miles Morales game because it is pretty damn good. Once again, thanks for watching this episode of Comics for Casuals. I really enjoy making these, so any love you can send our way would be absolutely fantastic. Leave a like down below, and if you have any specific comics or characters you want me to talk about, then leave a comment as well. Check out the rest of the stuff on the Maxx channel, such as classics like this.
No, I can do it.
Maxx, come on, hurry. I'm just going to stand here and panic.
I can do it. Gather the things together.
I can't until there's a plate, Maxx.
You can at least pick something up.
I can't until there's a plate. Ow, on fire.
Right? Completely classic. Now, I'm going to go back to playing the new Spider-Man game, but I will see you all next time. Bye.